Hail and well met friends, Andang here with some news. Update 15 is set to launch November 5th. That is just a week away. A Massively article did report on this. Justin Olivetti did, so it's a very reputable source that LOTRO will be releasing Update 15 on November 5th. And so to discuss this news, I have with me Sithrith. So welcome, Sithrith.
Hello.
And the main reason we're having this discussion is because it feels too quick. There's an epic battle in this update. There's the new areas. There is the new class, the Beorning. There's all these things that they have to work on, and they've only had 3 builds of beta. Less builds than Helm's Deep expansion, even though I feel like Helm's Deep had about the same level of things going on. And we're having less builds with a whole new class, a new epic battle that's a different type of epic battle. It just feels like it's too soon, and so I'm thinking that it's probably being, forced down by Warner Brothers or somebody, because I really don't think that it's ready. What do you think, Sithrith?
I completely agree. I played beta build 1, and we were kind of, cautiously optimistic, like, well, maybe they'll get a lot done in the next few builds. And I think we figured they would release Update 15 mid-November, but before Thanksgiving. But early November, the first week of November, way too soon. They need at least, I think, at least one more build.
Yeah.
But probably a lot more than that, to be
Probably
honest.
2 more. And what a mistake to not release it on November 15th.
Yeah, well, that's of course the
Update
obvious one.
15 on November 15th.
They
Turbine.
they released Update 14 on the 14th, so
Exactly.
they missed an opportunity here.
But
Unless, of course, the Massively article is a typo, but it's
yeah.
not
But I
likely.
mean, I would be very surprised if it was. Um, Especially since, Turbine hasn't asked them to correct it or anything like that yet. Um, and so I would be very surprised, and I'll go ahead and go in the video here and double check. It still says November 5th on the article, so they've had it up for the majority of a day, and Turbine didn't tell them to change it yet, so I'd be very surprised if it was a typo. One thing that I recently literally just found out is that the Beorning mounted combat is not even remotely implemented into the current build of the beta.
And that's a really big problem because people are going to want to use the Gift of the Valar for their Beornings. A lot of people were expecting the Beorning to launch at level 50. And, I mean, it's great that they decided to start it at level 1 instead, but there are going to be people who have been waiting with the Gift of the Valar to play level 50 Beorning. They're going to get 25 levels, and possibly, like, depending on how fast they go through the levels, they could get to level 75 in a week and end up stuck at a wall with no mounted combat.
Or even less than that, if you're VIP, you get, rested XP, you have the runes and things like
Yeah.
that from previous expansions. Plus, if you wanted to buy XP, you could easily get up to level 100 within a week, I would say. And from level 50. And that's a really big issue when you don't have
Yeah.
mounted combat working yet in the current build, and at the very least, no testing of mounted combat on the Beorning.
Right. It's
That
definitely possible to get through Rohan without mounted combat. I know people who hate mounted combat and so they don't do it at all, but that's like assuming that people aren't going to do mounted combat. There's a pretty big risk, and leaving such a huge system completely untested and incomplete is just
yeah,
a huge mistake.
and I mean, right now you only have one attack skill
Right.
and it's terrible. It does no damage. It I
It's
have another
unplayable.
video that I'm releasing on my channel, and it shows that it literally takes like a good minute or two to kill an enemy, if not more.
No, that's just
That shouldn't be the state that the class is in before release. Now that being said, the actual like class mechanics and things like that, I feel are very polished. I think red line could use a little bit more work, but yellow line is done, I think. They have it fantastic. It might be a little too overpowered, but
Yeah.
it is done. Blue line, I feel like is kind of in between the two. It's good. It doesn't need any more work, but it could probably use a few more things to make it a bit more interesting.
Mhm.
Um, but one thing that I really like about the yellow line Bayoning is that there's a skill that lets you actually move 70% of your incoming heals to another target.
Yeah.
And that's going to allow for so much strategy because let's say you're an off tank, you could have Minstrel healing you, and you pass on 70% of the heals from that Minstrel to the main tank. And so then all of a sudden the Minstrel is healing both the main tank and the off tank at the same time. And
Yep.
let's say the Minstrel gets aggroed, you can have it to where the Minstrel gets 70% of their own single target heals back to themselves.
Mhm. It's definitely a very interesting skill. I don't think we've seen anything quite like that to date in LOTRO.
I can't think of anything like that in other MMOs either.
Mhm. Good point.
I've been trying to think, and I can't think of any other skill like that in other MMOs. And so this is something that is really unique to the Beorning. And I think that just with that one skill alone, Turbine really made the class be blown out of the park. And really, each line is very viable. If you want to be a healer slash
Mhm.
support, you can, and be really good at it. If you want to be a tank, you can, and be really good at it. If you want to be a damage, the damage line is actually one of the weaker lines, but it's still pretty strong. And so I feel like that they've done a great job with the Beorning. They just need to get mounted combat fixed, and then the other big thing, the epic battle.
Mhm.
They have a lot of work
I'm
left on that.
yeah. Build one solo, depending on your class. Pretty much most classes, it was completely unplayable. You complete the instance at all. You had to be in a duo, and it had to be with at least, well, both of you being AoE classes to complete it. There's just too many mobs. I have not played it in the most recent build, but from what I understand, it hasn't made a whole lot of progress since build one.
Yeah, from what I've heard from other people who have played, it's basically at the same spot, and that's really disappointing if they don't get that fixed before launch because this offensive epic battle is their chance to justify the system for the
Hmm.
next however long. It's a new type of battle. They need to prove that it can work to players.
And another problem is when they released the original Epic Battle system, a huge part of the problem with them was that they didn't really finish them all the way when they released
Hmm.
them, and you had to wait however many months until they did a few rounds of fixes, and then they were better. So
It
it seems like they're
was
going to be going the same route with this Epic Battle, which is super disappointing because they could have made this amazing right off the bat.
it was 6 months before the original epic battles were in a decent spot after
Hmm.
release, and they still are, editing and tweaking the original ones, even in this update,
Right.
which is good. I'm glad that they're going back,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I mean they could have put so much more polish by not having them release at the same time as the class changes back then, and then this time it's kind of the same situation. They're releasing it with a class.
Hmm. Yep.
It just feels like that
They're just
there's
putting way too much on their plate, it seems, around this time of year. Last year was all the
yeah.
class revamps, along with a full expansion that would have been a full expansion on its own without the class revamps. And now they're doing a whole content land area, a new epic battle. This is a pretty sizable update on its own, and then to throw in a whole new class with only three beta builds,
Yeah, I
it's
think that
just
that's the real key is there's only been 3 beta builds, and I think even just by making it go until November 15th, just that little bit of time could have made a huge difference.
honestly, I would have liked to see them. delay this update until 2015, early 2015. They won't do it,
I
obviously.
don't know
It's
about that
coming next
long,
week.
but at the same time, you can't really do holiday updates and releases. It's very hard
That's
for
the
them to
thing.
be successful. Also,
If there were
when
no
is the
holidays,
World of Warcraft update coming?
oh, that's a good point.
That's the 13th of November.
They want to get in before that.
They want to get in
Yep.
before the World of Warcraft update. I'm guessing that it's probably a push from the marketing team to get the update out quicker. But if your update's
So
worse because of it,
it's not going to help. It's going
it's
to
not
hurt
going
you
to
more.
help.
Yep.
And I really feel sorry for the team at Turbine because you know you usually know from what I've heard from developers if your release is not where it needs to be. In fact, you
Hmm.
almost always know. And so they know that it's not where they need it to be, at least in the current build. They might do a lot of patching between now and release, and all this might be mute. But based on previous releases, that's probably not going to be the case.
And I
Um,
think it doesn't help that less than 2 weeks ago they had a round of layoffs,
yeah.
and now they're putting out this update. It must be absolute chaos over there. I can't imagine it's.
Uh, I think that it's just a lot of somebody higher up pushing them to get
Hmm.
this stuff out, or
Right,
maybe
but
even
then
just the
now,
marketing team pushing horizontally.
oh, definitely.
It's
But
something
now the
is like that's
developers are
going on.
left to clean up the mess,
Yeah, and
and I feel bad for them.
and it is a bit of a mess. I don't think it's near as bad as the Helm's Deep mess, obviously,
Hmm.
because that was
That was
there was
big.
so much broken there. At least the Beorning class works here aside from mounted combat,
Hmm.
um, and actually is a lot of fun, in my opinion at least. It's really just the epic battle that's not quite where it needs to be, which is very disappointing. I was hoping that they'd have both of these polished because first impressions of the new Beorning class, thankfully they've got it really polished and that should be good. People should be happy with their purchases, I think, for the most part.
Hmm.
But first impressions of this new kind of epic battle, that's gonna leave people very weary of Minas
Now
Tirith when
here's
that
a
comes around.
question: so this is a Gondor. This is an extra area of Gondor. Do people have to pay for this extra? Well, like, do
Yeah,
non-VIPs have to pay for this?
I think even well, I guess VIPs are getting everything for free, aren't they?
Yeah,
But yeah, I believe non-VIPs do have to pay for Central Gondor.
that's definitely going to make this not great because if they're paying for Central Gondor, the region is pretty much the same as Western Gondor, and
And
then
that's
people are
another
looking forward to this
issue
epic battle.
is I feel like they didn't have enough time diversifying this place. Now, in build 2, they did make a few landscape changes from my initial videos, so they have made it a bit better.
Hmm.
It's still not diversified enough. It still feels very similar to the previous part of Gondor. And
Right, so the
so,
saving grace was going to be this epic battle, but if it's not functional, then what's the point?
exactly, and it's very disappointing to see it
Mm.
this way. Obviously, they can still fix it by the time of release, but it's
Yeah,
very
we have to keep in
unlikely.
mind that the developers are usually at least one build, if not two builds ahead of whatever they put on Bull Roar.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so this build, they'll basically have a week to polish their own internal build beyond, and plus the amount of time since it went on. So they'll have almost 2 weeks from the current build of beta until release, which is actually a lot of time when you're polishing.
Hmm.
Um, I hope they can get it all in place by then, or at least
Me
in
too.
a better spot.
Hmm.
Um, I also hope they don't get rid of that Bewarning skill that is so unique to the class in Yellow Line because it
Mm.
just it's totally its own and there's no other mechanic like it in any other MMOs that I've seen and definitely not in LOTRO. And it can
Definitely.
add so much depth to LOTRO again, which I think with these class changes it kind of feels like that LOTRO's lost that. So I'm
Hmm.
glad that they have. It feels like in the Beorning, they built it from the ground up with this class tree in mind,
Hmm.
and they've also
Definitely.
been able to really focus on the Beorning as opposed to having to manage 9 classes at once.
Right. Well, as someone who's played a captain this whole time I've been playing LOTRO for 7 years, the Bjorning is kind of a bittersweet class because as we've seen it progress through these builds, it's kind of become apparent that the Bjorning is now the jack of all trades that the captain originally was. With Helm's Deep, we saw that jack of all trades versatility in the captain class kind of fall away, and now it seems the Bjorning has taken up that mantle. So I'm excited for the Bjorning because I miss that. But at the same time, I kind of want my old captain back, and it
I
makes me
mean,
a little sad.
the easiest way I can describe the Bjorning quickly is a classic captain lore master.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
It feels like, you have each of the different lines and they all function very well. You have your very functional DPS, your very functional tanking, your very functional healing, and they're all very original. And I think what helps it as well is there's not that previous class residue.
Mm,
And so it feels like it's supposed to be this way. Plus, they literally designed it with this system in mind, whereas the
right,
captain and all the other classes, they were just transferring them over to this system.
right.
And so I think that the Bjorning in this system will feel like one of the stronger classes because it was designed from the ground up to be in this system.
Right.
And so that really makes me excited for this update because luckily, assuming they don't break anything between now and then, the Bjorning is about where it needs to be. It's just that everything else kind of feels like it isn't.
Yep.
And I mean, the landscape and quests and story, they're all fine. It's just that there's
Right. They're not
nothing
bad. They're just
there's
not
just
as
nothing
exciting.
original. Well,
Right.
there are some original things and the landscape is kind of diverse, but it's not as much as it was, say, from
Western
East,
Gondor.
really, yeah, Western Gondor to here, like it was between Rohans. So,
Yep.
do you have any closing thoughts, Sithrith?
Bear puns are good.
Bear puns are good. All right. Well, hopefully Turbine does get this in order for the launch a week from now on November 5th. Um, it's also real quick. Before we close out, it's a bit weird that it's releasing on a Wednesday.
Yeah, that's true. Usually they do either Tuesdays or Thursdays. Um, Wednesday.
Well, they for a while they'd just been doing Mondays,
Right, yeah, that's true. It used to be that they were always on Tuesdays or Thursdays.
but they've never
Lately,
really
they've
had
just
a
been Mondays.
Wednesday.
No, it's kind of weird. Although, I guess, well, no, I was gonna say it makes sense because then the team has time to kind of react to players' reactions. However, Monday seems like the better option for that because then you have that whole week.
Yeah.
Wednesday is weird
I'm
day.
wondering if it's a I'm wondering if the marketing people still wanted a 5 or if it's just like a compromise where um, maybe somebody higher up wanted them to release it on Monday and they said, "Give us till Wednesday. We need
Yeah,
2 extra days." Or
maybe the marketing team or whatever just wanted them to release it as soon as possible, and Wednesday was the furthest the developers could push it back out. We don't know.
hmm But anyway, it will be interesting to see the launch of the update. The story is always going to be good. I wouldn't
Hmm.
worry at all about the story. Um, the landscape, while not very different from the previous area, still looks amazing, and particularly certain harbors and things like that look really good. I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's really just the epic battle and the Bjorning not being polished beyond level 50, really. And that's just because I think that they've had this push from somewhere to get it
Mm.
out now. Um, anyway, hopefully everything will turn out great. I'm sure that they'll be patching it after and make it great for people coming in later, if nothing else. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and be on the lookout for update 15 on November 5th. Till then, thank you guys so much.